Okay, the story of the woman with the alabaster box is in all four of the Gospels, which is phenomenal. If it's in all the four Gospels, it has to be really important. Now, in two of these Gospels, it is followed immediately by the phrase, and Judas went out immediately to betray the Christ. So, this is not coincidental. This woman was the reason Judas betrayed the Christ. So, who is she? What did she do that was so upsetting to Judas? First, the backstory. Exodus chapter 4. Moses doesn't want to talk to Pharaoh. He wants Aaron to do it. So we have this little exchange in Exodus 4:16 that reads like this. And he, meaning Aaron, shall be your spokesman unto the people. And he shall be, even he shall be to you instead of a mouth. And thou shalt be to him instead of God. Now in the Hebrew, that last part, thou shalt be to him instead of God, that's only 3 words. And those 3 words are these. And I'm going to butcher these because I don't speak Hebrew. But those 3 words are Atah Haya Elohim, which directly translated says, you are God. Which makes Moses, in this context, Elohim. Now, if you want to see what Moses has to say about himself as God, we can turn to Deuteronomy 32, to the Song of Moses, where Moses says this directly. Deuteronomy 32:39. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God beside me. I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. Neither is there any that can deliver out of my hand. Sounds pretty arrogant, doesn't it? Okay. We see here that Moses is literally acting as God. He sits in the seat of God as God, proclaiming that he is God, and beside him there is no other. Now, Jesus tells us that Abraham also sat in the seat of God as God. John 8:58 is where Jesus tells the Levites, truly, truly, I have told you before, Abraham is I am. So Jesus is telling them, while Moses is Elohim, Abraham is Jehovah. Now, if you were to read the Babylonian Talmud, you would discover that this doctrine of the godship of man is not new or surprising. It's standard. There is, even now, according to the Talmud, a man who sits in the seat of God as God, declaring he is God. And according to the Talmud, that man is the righteousness of God. Okay? So, this is the background you need to understand what happens next. Now, back to our story. The woman with the alabaster box walks into a room filled with patriarchy. She approaches the Christ. She opens her little alabaster vial of holy anointing oil, and she anoints his head with holy anointing oil. Now, at this point, we can easily recognize her as one leg of a parable, whose mirror image is Moses himself, who also used holy anointing oil to anoint Aaron. Now, Moses sat in the seat of God as God when he anointed Aaron as his high priest. When Mary of Bethany anointed Christ her high priest, she also sat in the seat of God as God, just like Moses had done. She basically deposed Moses and sat in his seat as God and declared herself God, and Jesus, her high priest, her spokesperson. Now, if you find this utterly blasphemous and distasteful, so did Judas Iscariot. Now, Judas and the Patriarchy were outraged and accused Mary of a pernicious act. Now, a pernicious act is an act that will get you executed under the law. They accused her of sin. They cried out for her execution. They began to even question Jesus. How does he not know this woman is a sinner? Like, how can he even be the Son of God or even a prophet if he doesn't know this? And Judas Iscariot went out immediately to betray Jesus to the high priest. Now, in the account in Luke 7, it refers to Mary of Bethany as a sinner a couple of different times. But Jesus called her a woman of faith who was greatly loved and whose sins were forgiven. In fact, Jesus made this one woman who sat in the seat of God as God the hallmark of his gospel, saying this: "Wherever in all the world my gospel is taught, the story of this woman will be told to keep her in your remembrance." Now, the Levites, or the patriarchy that was present, believed that all women were sinners because Moses accused Eve of eating a forbidden fruit and determined that the collective punishment inflicted upon womankind would be subjugation to patriarchy. So it was that they believed about Mary of Bethany. She had committed no sin, but she was still a sinner in their eyes simply by virtue of being a woman, because they believed that the sin of Eve was collective in nature and affected every woman, no matter what they did or didn't do. So at this table, there was a man named Simon who was just appalled at what was happening. And Jesus begins to tell Simon a parable of a debtor, someone who owes a debt, a great debt. Now, Jesus is clearly referring to what the Levites believe is the sin debt of Eve and womankind in general. They believe that women owe men a sin debt of servitude. Now, Jesus informs Simon that the sin of Eve has been forgiven. The mythological debt of Eve has been erased. Women are no longer sin debtors to the patriarchy, according to Jesus. They've been restored to their proper place in society, the seat of matriarchy, the seat of God. Now, we can confirm this interpretation by comparing it to the parable of forgiveness in Matthew chapter 18, where a man is forgiven a great debt that he cannot repay. But then, after he's been forgiven of his debts, he refuses to forgive his debtors of their debts. And he goes around and he beats them and he strangles them and he abuses them, making sure that they pay every last thing they owe him. Now, this was a man who was forgiven and then refused to forgive others. And when the king, who had forgiven him, found out that he was going about abusing his debtors, the king was enraged. And he called this man a wicked man, a sadist, devoid of compassion and without pity. And he delivered this man to the tormentors and reinstated his entire debt and commanded him to pay it in full. So the moral of the story that Jesus is telling is this: forgiven men who refuse to forgive their wives the sin of Eve and exact from them the debt of Eve, which is subjugation, those men will have their forgiveness revoked, and they will be subjugated to their tormentors. So Jesus came to restore woman to her rightful place, matriarchy, inasmuch as woman believed she was lesser than man and willingly subjugated herself to man. She sinned the sin of Jezebel. And inasmuch as woman believed she was sin and a servant, she was deceived. And inasmuch as woman believed she was under collective punishment for the sin of one woman, she was deluded. In the end, Jesus made woman the hallmark of his gospel and said this: inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these, my daughters, you've done it unto me. We are to keep the woman with the alabaster box in our remembrance, to remember that the gospel of Jesus Christ is a matriarchy in which woman is not subjugated to any man, but rules with loving kindness and mercy. Just as woman broke her body and shed her blood to bring life into the world, so Christ broke his body and shed his blood to bring matriarchy back to a dying world. This is the Bible Literacy Project. If you like this story, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. We are here to teach you the Bible as it was written and not as it has been imagined.